The Grand Hall of the Zyran Empire was massive, built to fit beings much taller and stronger than humans. Golden pillars stretched toward the ceiling, glowing crystals lighting up the room with a soft blue hue. At the center of it all stood Corporal Ethan Voss, a human security officer. He stood with his fellow guards, silent and alert, protecting Earth's ambassador. It was supposed to be a simple diplomatic meeting. Then the Queen entered. The air grew heavy as Queen Virexa of Zyran stepped forward, towering over every other being in the room. She was 8 feet tall, her armored robes flowing behind her. Her sharp violet eyes scanned the room with authority, and every Zyran warrior in the hall bowed their heads in respect. She had ruled her people for years, a leader both feared and respected. But then she saw him. Virexa froze mid-step. Her breathing hitched, and her usually calm, commanding presence shattered. The humans noticed. Ethan noticed. Her eyes locked onto him, unblinking. It wasn't just a passing glance. It was pure shock, like she had seen a ghost. Ethan stiffened. He wasn't the most important person here. He was just a security officer, a soldier assigned to protect the ambassador. Why was the Queen staring at him like that? The room, once filled with formal chatter, became silent. The Zyran nobles exchanged confused looks. Their queen had never hesitated before. Ethan felt the tension, but he held his ground. His job was to remain still, to not cause a scene. But inside, his mind raced. Had he done something wrong? Was he in danger? Virexa's grip tightened around the metal staff in her hand. Her mind screamed in disbelief. This is impossible. The human before her looked exactly like him. Her ex-husband, the former king of Zyran, a warrior who had been lost in battle long ago. His death had left a wound in her heart, one she had buried deep. And now, here stood a human, with the same face, same eyes, same stance. It made no sense. The ambassador, noticing the awkward silence, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, we are honored to be in your presence. We bring greetings from Earthand." "Who is he?" Virexa's voice cut through the hall like a blade. Everyone turned toward Ethan. He swallowed. Corporal Ethan Voss, security officer. His voice was firm, respectful, but his confusion was clear. The Queen's expression darkened, her violet eyes narrowing. The name was different. The species was different, but the resemblance was undeniable. Silence stretched. The human delegation grew uneasy. Was the Queen offended? Was this some kind of cultural insult? Then, after a long pause, Virexa finally spoke again, this time softer. "I see." She turned sharply and continued walking, her regal composure returning, though her mind remained in turmoil. Ethan exhaled, tension leaving his body. Whatever had just happened, it was not normal. But deep inside, he knew one thing. This was only the beginning. Ethan Voss couldn't shake the strange moment from his mind. The way Queen Virexa froze when she saw him, the look in her violet eyes, like she had seen a ghost. But why? He was just a security officer, assigned to guard the ambassador during peace talks between Earth and the Zyran Empire. After the Queen regained her composure, the meeting had continued as planned. The ambassador discussed trade agreements, military alliances, and shared technology. But Ethan could feel the weight of Virexa's gaze. Every so often, her piercing eyes flickered toward him, studying him with an expression he couldn't read. When the meeting ended, Ethan thought his part in this mission was over. He was wrong. 2 Zyran royal guards, massive warriors in dark armor, approached the human delegation. One of them, his deep voice like a rumbling storm, announced, "Corporal Ethan Voss. The Queen requests your presence in her private chambers." Ethan felt his heart skip a beat. The human ambassador hesitated. "May I ask why?" The Zyran warrior's face remained unreadable. The Queen did not explain, only that it is urgent. The ambassador turned to Ethan. "You don't have to go if you don't want to." Ethan knew that, But something inside him told him he needed to. The way the queen looked at him, this wasn't normal. He wasn't in trouble. No, this was something else. So, with a deep breath, he nodded. I'll go. The queen's chambers were nothing like Ethan expected. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, glowing patterns that pulsed faintly, like they were alive. Large windows overlooked the planet's endless golden deserts, where 2 suns burned in the sky. The air inside was cool, filled with a faint, almost nostalgic scent, one that Ethan didn't recognize, but somehow felt familiar. Queen Virexa stood in the center of the room, waiting for him. She was still in her royal attire, her tall, armored figure casting a long shadow across the chamber floor. Ethan bowed slightly. You asked for me, Your Majesty. For a long moment, she didn't answer. She just stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then she spoke. You are not Siren. You are human, but you look exactly like him. Ethan frowned. Like who? The queen's violet eyes darkened. My husband, the former king of Zirin. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. That explained her reaction earlier. But how was that possible? I don't understand, he said carefully. Your husband, was he human? Virexa's lips pressed into a thin line. No, he was Zirin, a warrior, a ruler. Her voice softened, her usual commanding tone fading into something else, something almost painful. He was the only one who ever stood as my equal, the only one I ever trusted. She stepped closer, eyes locked onto his. And now, you stand before me, wearing his face. Ethan felt an uneasy weight settle in his chest. This wasn't just about resemblance. It was something deeper. I don't know what to say, he admitted honestly. I don't know why I look like him. Virexa studied him for a long moment. Then, without warning, she turned and walked toward an ornate cabinet. She pressed a hand against it, and a hidden compartment slid open. Inside was a holographic image, a portrait of a Zirin warrior. Ethan stepped closer, his breath catching in his throat. The warrior in the image was massive, with Zirin features, tall, powerful, with deep violet eyes. But his face, it was like looking into a mirror. Ethan swallowed hard. This is impossible. Virexa turned to him. Is it? Ethan shook his head. I don't know. I've never been to this planet before. My parents were human. There's no way I could be related to. But he stopped himself, because suddenly a memory flashed in his mind. His mother, before she passed, once told him, there's something special about your blood, Ethan. Something different. He never understood what she meant. Until now. Virexa folded her arms. There are stories among my people of warriors lost in battle, only to be reborn in distant places. Some call it legend. Others call it fate. Ethan's head spun. Are you saying? I do not know, Virexa admitted, but I will find out. Ethan knew then that his mission had changed. He had come here as a soldier, but now he was at the center of something much bigger. Ethan Voss sat on a cushioned seat inside Queen Virexa's private chamber, his mind spinning with questions. He had expected this mission to be about guarding the ambassador, nothing more. But now he was face to face with a Zirin queen who believed he looked exactly like her late husband, the former king. The queen stood near the glowing holographic image of the warrior, her expression unreadable. The resemblance was undeniable. Even Ethan had to admit it. Virexa turned toward him. Tell me, Ethan Voss, where do you come from? He cleared his throat. Earth. Born and raised in a small city, my parents were both human. Virexa studied him carefully, her violet eyes flickering with something he couldn't read. And yet, you wear the face of a Zirin king. Ethan exhaled. I don't know why. I've never even met another Zirin before today. The queen stepped closer, her towering form casting a shadow over him. She was powerful, intimidating, yet there was something else in her gaze. Not just suspicion, but curiosity. "You say you are human," she said, "but there is only one way to be sure." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She raised a hand, and the hidden compartment in the wall slid open again. This time, she pulled out a small metallic device. Thin, sharp, and glowing with a faint blue light. "A blood test," she explained. "It will confirm if you are truly human or something else." Ethan hesitated. This was getting too strange, too fast. He had no reason to believe he was anything but human, but a part of him needed to know. With a slow nod, he held out his hand. "All right, do it." Virexa stepped forward and pressed the device against his wrist. A sharp sting. A small drop of blood. Then silence. The device blinked, scanning the sample. Ethan held his breath, his heart pounding. Then, the screen flashed red. Virexa's eyes widened slightly. She turned the device toward him. "This is impossible," she murmured. Ethan leaned forward. The screen displayed his DNA structure, but something was off. It wasn't entirely human. "What does it mean?" he asked. Virexa's voice was calm, but firm. "It means your blood carries Zyran traits." Ethan stiffened. Zyran traits? That was impossible. He wasn't an alien. His parents were humans. Weren't they? His mind raced back to his childhood, his mother's words echoing in his head. "There's something special about your blood, Ethan. Something different." At the time, he thought she meant he was unique, special in some emotional way. But now, "Are you saying I'm part Zyran?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. Virexa nodded. "Not just any Zyran. Your DNA matches that of my husband, the king." Ethan felt the floor beneath him tilt. That made no sense. Was this a mistake? A coincidence? "There must be an error," he said quickly. Virexa remained silent for a moment. Then she turned away, deep in thought. "Years ago," she said, her voice softer than before, "the king was lost in battle. His ship was destroyed in an explosion. There were no remains." Ethan listened carefully, his pulse pounding. "The Zyran people believe in rebirth," she continued. "That a warrior's soul may be carried into another form, another life." He shook his head. "You think I do not know," she admitted. "But the proof is in your blood." Ethan rubbed his temple. This was too much. He had lived his whole life believing he was just a human, just a soldier. And now, a powerful alien queen was telling him that he might have once been her husband in another life. Silence stretched between them. Then, Virexa's voice hardened. "If this is true, then there will be consequences." Ethan looked up. "What kind of consequences?" "The Zyran High Council does not take matters of blood lightly," she said. "If they discover what I have found, they will demand answers. If they believe you are truly the King Reborn, they may not let you leave this planet." Ethan's breath hitched. Not let him leave. He had come here as a simple soldier, but now he was caught in something far bigger than he ever imagined. Virexa stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I need to know the truth, Ethan, who you really are." He looked up at her, his mind still reeling. And deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. Ethan sat in stunned silence, staring at the blood test results. Part Zyran. The thought felt impossible. His whole life, he had believed he was just an ordinary human. A soldier, nothing more. Yet, Queen Virexa stood before him, holding the proof in her hands. His DNA matched that of the former Zyran king. His heart pounded. This has to be a mistake. Virexa's piercing violet eyes locked onto his. Zyran technology does not make mistakes. Ethan took a slow breath, trying to calm himself. "Maybe my ancestors were Zyran. Maybe this isn't as crazy as it sounds." Virexa tilted her head slightly, considering his words. "If you were simply part Zyran, that would be one thing. But your DNA is nearly identical to my late husband's. That is why I cannot ignore this." Her voice was steady, but Ethan could sense the emotion beneath her words. For her, this wasn't just science. This was personal. A deep silence filled the chamber. Ethan finally shook his head. I don't remember anything about being the Zyran king. I've lived on Earth my whole life. My parents were human. Virex's expression softened slightly. Then perhaps the truth lies with them. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? She stepped closer, her gaze serious. You need to ask yourself, did your parents ever tell you everything? The question sent a chill down his spine. Memories surfaced, small things that never made sense before. His mother always telling him he was special. His father avoiding questions about their family's history. His unusual strength, endurance, and instincts, things that always set him apart from other soldiers. Could it all be connected? He clenched his fists. There's only one way to find out. I need to get back to Earth and talk to my family. Virexa exhaled slowly. That may not be easy. Ethan narrowed his eyes. What do you mean? She turned away, activating a holographic display. The image flickered to life, showing a Zyran battleship hovering in orbit above the planet. Ethan's stomach tightened. That's not one of yours, is it? Virexa shook her head. No, that ship belongs to the High Council. They have arrived earlier than expected. Ethan's jaw clenched. He had only been here a short time, yet now he was trapped in the middle of a political storm. What do they want? He asked. Virexa turned to face him. They seek answers. If they learn of your DNA, they will not let you leave. Ethan took a deep breath. Then we keep it a secret. Virexa hesitated for a moment. That may be difficult. The High Council is powerful, and they have spies everywhere. Ethan stood up, determination in his eyes. Then I'll just have to leave before they find out. Virexa studied him for a moment, then finally nodded. I will help you. Ethan blinked. Why? The Queen's expression was unreadable. Because if you are truly my husband reborn, then I must protect you. Ethan's chest tightened at her words. He didn't know if he believed any of this yet, but one thing was clear. He had to leave Zyran Prime before the High Council discovered the truth. Before it was too late. Ethan paced inside the royal chamber, his mind racing. Every second he spent on Zyran Prime increased the risk of exposure. If the High Council learned of his DNA match with the late king, they would never let him go. Queen Virexa stood by the window, her violet eyes fixed on the distant Zyran battleship hovering in orbit. The High Council is moving quickly. We have little time. Ethan clenched his fists. Then we need a plan. How do I get off this planet without them noticing? Virexa turned to him, her expression unreadable. There may be a way, but it is dangerous. Ethan let out a short laugh. Figures. She motioned for him to follow, and led him through a hidden corridor beneath the palace. The walls glowed faintly with bioluminescent patterns, ancient Zyran symbols shifting as they walked. This tunnel leads to an old spaceport, she explained. It was used centuries ago for emergency evacuations. The High Council does not know it exists. Ethan's eyebrows raised. And there's a working ship there. Virexa hesitated. Not exactly. But there is an old stealth cruiser. If we can power it up, you might have a chance to escape undetected. Might? Ethan asked, smirking. The Queen allowed the faintest smile. I believe humans call this a long shot. Ethan shook his head, his military instincts kicking in. It was risky, but it was a chance. As they reached the end of the tunnel, the door slid open, revealing a vast underground hangar. Dust covered the floor, and abandoned ships rested like sleeping giants. Ethan's eyes scanned the area until he spotted the stealth cruiser. It was sleek, black, and surprisingly well-preserved. He whistled. Not bad. Virexa stepped beside him. Its cloaking technology will allow you to bypass the High Council's sensors, but the ship has not been used in a long time. It may require repairs. Ethan nodded and cracked his knuckles. I'll take my chances. The countdown begins. Ethan pried open the control panel inside the cruiser. The interface was Xiran technology, completely alien to him, but he had worked with advanced human systems before. Technology was technology. He took a deep breath and started bypassing the security locks. If he couldn't get this ship running, he was as good as trapped. Meanwhile, Virexa monitored the hangar entrance. Her expression remained calm, but Ethan sensed her tension. After several minutes, the control panel beeped. Power restored. Ethan grinned. Looks like I still got it. Virexa stepped forward. Can it fly? Ethan ran a systems check. The engines hummed softly, but a red warning flashed on the screen. Hyperdrive is offline, he muttered. Virexa's expression darkened. Then you cannot jump to Earth. Ethan sighed. So close, yet so far. He turned to Virexa. Can you fix it? She shook her head. Not without a replacement part. Ethan leaned back, exhaling sharply. There had to be another way. Then an idea struck him. What about one of the other ships in this hangar? Can we take a hyperdrive from them? Virexa's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't considered that. Perhaps, but we must be quick. The High Council is already suspicious of my actions. Ethan smirked. Then let's get to work. A race against time. They searched the hangar, moving through the silent graveyard of old ships. Dust clung to their boots as they examined each wreck. Finally, Virexa stopped before a damaged Xiran fighter. This one still has a functional hyperdrive. Ethan examined the ship. It was smaller than the stealth cruiser, but the drive system was nearly identical. This could work. As he prepared to remove the part, Virexa's communicator beeped. She answered it, and a voice crackled through. Your Majesty, the High Council has requested your presence. They suspect something is amiss. Ethan and Virexa exchanged glances. They were running out of time. Virexa turned to Ethan. I must go and delay them. Finish the repairs and leave as soon as possible. Ethan hesitated. What about you? She met his gaze. Do not worry about me. Just get to Earth. Ethan clenched his jaw, but nodded. She was risking everything for him. He wouldn't waste this chance. As Virexa disappeared into the tunnel, Ethan focused on his task. He grabbed his tools and got to work. If he failed, there would be no second chances. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead as he tightened the last bolt on the hyperdrive module. The sleek black stealth cruiser hummed softly as the system rebooted. It was ready. He exhaled, relieved, but time was running out. Virexa had gone to distract the High Council, but he knew she wouldn't be able to stall him for long. As he prepared to board the ship, his wrist communicator buzzed. He pressed the button, and Virexa's voice came through. Ethan, listen carefully. The High Council is coming for you. You must leave now. Ethan's heart pounded. What about you? There was a short pause before she spoke again. I will handle them. Just go. Ethan clenched his fists. Leaving her behind didn't feel right. But before he could argue, the communicator cut off. The betrayal. Virexa stood before the High Council in the Grand Chamber. The council members, dressed in golden ceremonial robes, sat on their thrones, their piercing eyes locked on her. The Grand Minister, a tall Xiran with silver markings on his face, narrowed his eyes. Your Majesty, we have received troubling reports. Virexa remained calm. What reports? Another council member leaned forward. That you have been protecting the human intruder. The Queen kept her expression neutral. The human you speak of is under my personal protection. The Grand Minister's expression darkened. Why? He is dangerous. Virexa met his gaze. Because he is not just any human. He bears a genetic resemblance to the late king. Gasps echoed through the chamber. The council members exchanged glances, their faces filled with disbelief. The Grand Minister's eyes narrowed. And what do you intend to do with this knowledge? Virexa remained silent. The Grand Minister's voice hardened. Your Majesty, we have tolerated much, but this is treason. The Queen's hands clenched at her sides. She had known this moment would come. Then the doors to the chamber slammed open. A Zyran warrior marched inside, bowing before the council. The human is attempting to escape. Virex's heart sank. Ethan was in danger. The Grand Minister smirked. It is too late, Your Majesty. We have already deployed our forces. He will not leave Zyran Prime alive. Virexa took a step forward, her voice cold and commanding. If you harm him, I swear. The Grand Minister raised his hand. You swear what, Your Majesty? That you will betray your own people for a human. Virexa's breath caught in her throat. She had played her final card, and she had lost. The chase begins. Ethan sat in the stealth cruiser's cockpit, fingers flying over the controls. The engines roared to life, and the ship hovered above the ground. The hangar doors began to open, revealing the starry sky beyond. But then, an alarm blared. Ethan cursed under his breath. They knew he was escaping. The communicator buzzed again, and this time, it wasn't Virexa. A deep, threatening voice echoed through the cockpit. Human, surrender now. You cannot escape. Ethan glanced at the radar. 5 Zyran fighters were closing in fast. His hands tightened around the controls. Watch me. He punched the thrusters, and the stealth cruiser shot forward, streaking toward the sky. The Zyran fighters pursued instantly, their weapons glowing as they locked onto him. Ethan gritted his teeth. He needed to reach orbit before they fired. The ship's cloaking system activated, and the stealth cruiser vanished from enemy scanners. For a brief moment, he thought he was safe. But then, a missile warning flashed on his screen. Ethan's heart pounded. They had guessed his trajectory. With lightning-fast reflexes, he jerked the controls, sending the ship into a sharp barrel roll. The missile narrowly missed, exploding behind him in a burst of fire. But the fighters weren't stopping. They were closing in. Ethan's fingers flew over the console. He needed to outmaneuver them. He spotted a massive asteroid field nearby. A smirk crossed his lips. Perfect. He steered the cruiser into the field, weaving between giant space rocks. The Zyran fighters hesitated but followed. Big mistake. Ethan twisted and turned through the asteroids, forcing the enemy ships to follow his unpredictable path. One fighter miscalculated and crashed into a rock, exploding in a fiery blast. Another fighter clipped an asteroid, spiraling out of control before vanishing into the void. Ethan grinned. 2 down, 3 to go. But before he could celebrate, a red light flashed on his console. His shields were failing. If he took one direct hit, he was finished. The sacrifice. Back on Zyran Prime, Virexa watched the battle unfold on a holographic display. Her heart ached as she saw Ethan's ship struggling against the Zyran forces. She couldn't let him die. Taking a deep breath, she activated the Royal Override command on the palace control panel. A warning message appeared. Warning. Activating override will be seen as treason. Are you sure? Virexa didn't hesitate. She pressed the confirmation button. Instantly, the Zyran fighters received a direct order from the Queen herself. Stand down. Cease pursuit immediately. For a brief moment, the pilots hesitated. Then, one by one, the fighters broke off the chase. Ethan's eyes widened as he saw the enemy ships retreat. What just happened? Then, his communicator buzzed. Virexa's voice came through, soft but urgent. Go, Ethan. Don't look back. Ethan's chest tightened. She had saved him, but at what cost? He clenched his jaw, gripping the controls. He would not let this be the last time they spoke. As the stealth cruiser jumped to hyperspace, Ethan made a silent vow. He would return for her, no matter what. Ethan sat in the cockpit of his stealth cruiser, staring at the stars streaking past as the ship traveled through hyperspace. His hands clenched into fists. Virexa had saved him. She had risked everything, her throne, her people, her life, just to ensure his escape. And now she was alone, facing the wrath of the High Council. Ethan couldn't accept that. He had two choices: disappear and stay safe, or go back and fight for her. For him, there was no real choice. He was going back. The Queen's fate. Virexa stood before the High Council once more, her wrists bound by glowing energy restraints. The Grand Minister looked down at her with a cold expression. "You have betrayed your own people for a human." Virexa held her head high. "I made a choice. A foolish choice," the Grand Minister said. "One that will cost you everything." The council chamber was silent as he continued. "You are no longer queen." Virexa's heart clenched, but she refused to show weakness. "You will be imprisoned," the Grand Minister declared. "And when the time comes, you will be exiled from Xiren Prime. You are no longer one of us." Virexa felt a sharp pain in her chest, but she remained calm. She had made her decision. Then, a loud explosion rocked the chamber. The guards spun toward the doors as alarms blared across the palace. Virexa's eyes widened. He came back. Ethan's last stand. Ethan marched through the palace, a stolen Xiren energy rifle in his hands. He had landed his ship in a restricted zone, avoiding detection for as long as possible. Now there was no more hiding. Xiren guards rushed toward him, weapons raised. Ethan dove behind a pillar, firing back with precise shots. He wasn't here to fight a war. He just needed to reach her. More guards approached, but Ethan was faster. He rolled across the floor, dodging energy blasts and taking down enemies one by one. The palace shook as his ship's automated cannons blasted holes in the outer walls, creating an escape route. Finally, he reached the council chamber. The doors burst open as Ethan stepped inside, his weapon raised. The High Council turned to him in shock. The Grand Minister's eyes burned with rage. "How dare you?" Ethan cut him off. "Where is she?" Virexa's voice came from the center of the room. "Ethan." He turned and saw her standing there, still bound in restraints. Without hesitation, he fired at the cuffs, shattering them. Virexa rubbed her wrists, staring at him in disbelief. "You came back." Ethan smirked. "I'm not leaving without you." Escape from Xiren Prime. The entire palace was now on high alert. The guards outside the chamber rushed in, surrounding them. Ethan's ammunition was low, and he knew they were outnumbered. Virexa stepped forward. "Lower your weapons." The guards hesitated. Even though she was no longer queen, her command still carried weight. The Grand Minister scowled. "Do not listen to her. They are both traitors." One of the younger guards spoke. "She has ruled us for years. Should we truly cast her aside for helping a single human?" A murmur spread among the soldiers. Some lowered their weapons, uncertain. Ethan seized the moment. He grabbed Virexa's hand. "Come on." She ran with him, dodging energy blasts as they sprinted through the palace. Guards chased them, but Virexa knew the layout better than anyone. They reached the main balcony, where Ethan's stealth cruiser hovered just below. Ethan activated his communicator. "Bring it up." The ship ascended, its doors opening just in time. Ethan grabbed Virexa by the waist and leaped onto the platform. The ship's doors slammed shut, and the engines roared to life. As they soared into the sky, Ethan looked back to see the Grand Minister standing on the balcony, his face twisted in rage. They had made it. A new beginning. The ship entered hyperspace, and silence filled the cockpit. Virexa sat in the co-pilot's chair, staring at the stars. Ethan exhaled, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. She turned to him. "You really came back for me." He smirked. "What kind of person would I be if I didn't?" For the first time in a long while, Virexa smiled. "So, what now?" she asked. Ethan leaned back in his chair. "We start over. Together." She nodded. And for the first time in her life, Virexa felt truly free.